Hello, and welcome to part three of our teaching series of the Embroidery Slow Stitching Journal. Last week we had part one. I did say we're doing part two this evening, right? Sorry. But last week we went over part one and we are ready to start on part two, which just like last week, there will be a PDF for the part three instructions in the files section of my private Facebook group, which is Captain Stitches and Friends. If you are not a member of that and you are wanting to follow along with this, I suggest that you click on the request to join, answer the few questions that are there, and you will be able to join my Facebook group and follow along with us and get all the files that are included with instructions, etc., little miscellaneous things to go along with this series. So, with that being said, by the way, this is Captain Stitches, and I'm Jean, in case you don't already know me. And if you aren't subscribed, please go ahead, hit that subscribe button and the bell so you get notifications when I go live or have videos that come up. So let's get right into it. I'm going to change over to the other camera and we will begin our part two. Okay, so here we are. And Whip is trying to sneak in as well. If he moves his head over this way, you might see him. He's down there trying to get up, of course, and say hello, but we're going to make him stay down. Sorry about that. We'll try and make him stay down. So here is what your book should kind of look like. We'll try to get that in. Let me zoom out just a little bit on this there so we can get that all in while I share this portion with you. But I'm going to go over what your book should look like now, your journal. There's a few things in here that won't be in yours yet. Just don't pay attention to that. It's part of what we will be learning today. So, but you have all of your 6 pages that should be put together and they should be clipped as I suggested, and they should be labeled. So you have your cover. When you open it up, you should have your inside cover, your page one, and all of these are clipped together. So when they keep them, don't get confused. You should have page two and page three. And they should be marked also with which ones your grid are going on. So and you should have page 4 and page 5, which is the center of your book. And then you should have page 6 and page 7 and page 8, page 9, which is the inside back, excuse me, sorry, of your book. And then you should have the back. So you should have those all together. You should have all 3 of your grid done. I don't have mine all done because I had to do some of the other things to prepare, but I'm on to number 2 and number 3, which you may notice that I did change the way that I was doing my layout of my grid. I did decide that I want that all in the front, so it will be the first 3 pages, the inside cover, page 1 and page 2 of my. Sorry about that. Just moved my whole entire desk there. But it will be the inside cover, page 1 and page 2. So they will be all right there together in that. But we will be using the inside cover. So I'm going to take that clip off. And I'm going to take that off because that is the portion that we will be working on today. It will be whatever is your first grid is what you will be working on. So I'm going to set the rest of this aside. We'll set it back there for now. But we are going to be learning 3 embroidery stitches today, which the second embroidery stitch, you learned that the back stitch was, which is what you did for your grid last week. So the second stitch that we are going to be learning today is the chain stitch. And then we are going to be learning the running stitch, and we are going to be learning the fly stitch, which I will show you those later. And you will want to start with your first grid square and go across the top accordingly. This will be the first one you're putting in, the second and the third, and then you will continue on that way through all 3 of your grids as we go along. And it is up to you. I would suggest that you do this, but you will want to label by putting chain stitch above where you are doing your chain stitch in that square, running stitch for the running stitch, and fly stitch, so you have a reference to go back to and know what those stitches are, for having a good reference on all 28 of the stitches, and a chance to look at them, see how you made them, decide on a stitch you may want to use in the slow stitching part of your book. But I would really highly suggest that you go ahead and label those. I just did that with my Pigma pen. I am not going to stitch them. I'm just doing it with the Pigma pen, so it is permanent there, and you can see that. So I think we will go on, and I will zoom in. And first of all, I have a couple tips. I am using, let me see if I can get that under there. I am using the John James chenille size 26 needle. I found that with the Valdani pearl cotton and using 2 or 3 of the floss, that the smaller needles will have a tendency to shred your thread by the number of times that it's going back and forth on there. The chenille needle has a longer eye of the needle, so it doesn't have the tendency to do that. So I am using those needles on my project instead. And then the other tip is, if you want a reference line to be able to follow for the stitches that you are doing, you can use a quilter's pencil like the Soul Line. Oops, there we are. Which this is the regular lead. If you have a darker fabric, you would use the white, or you can use a regular you could use a disappearing pen as well. And I have lightly marked a line for my stitches according to what we are doing, so that I can show you how that works to be able to follow that along. So those are the 2 tips that I have before we get started. And you can use whatever color yarn that you want for this. I already know basically the colors that I'm going to be using throughout my journal, so I chose to use those colors for my stitches. And I'm changing those colors as I go. So I am going to zoom back in, and we are going to get started with our chain stitch. I move this over here where you'll be able to see. I bring that, try and bring this down just a little. Of course, it's not wanting to move for me. Ow. Okay, there we go. But let me make sure I'm zoomed all the way in. I am. So let me see. Let me get to my. Okay. My thread here, which for the chain stitch, which you will find, sorry, I forgot to mention that we are using this book. We'll give it a chance to focus in there. Come on, focus. There we go. We are using this guide for those of you that have that, and I suggested it in the supplies, the Handy Embroidery Stitches at a Glance. It's a little carry-along book, and it has all of the stitches in it that we will be learning for this series. So you will go by the page numbers that are in this book. That's what I am referring to. If you don't have it, you will just use whatever reference that you have, but I will be letting you know what page they are on, which it is on page 12 of that little book. So the first thing that we are going to do is we're going to have our needle threaded, of course, and a knot in that. If you are using DMC floss or whatever floss, you will want to use 2 strands. If you are using the pearl cotton, I am using the size 12. And you start by coming up from the back. Just going to get my needle in there. So you're coming up at the start of your stitch. And then you are going to hold your thread so it is below your needle. You're going to make a loop and you're going to go right next to that stitch that you came up in, right next to it. And then you are going to go down just a short distance and bring your needle up. And you are going to keep your thread underneath your needle so that you are basically making a loop and you're catching it with that you came up. And that forms a little loop like a chain. So then to continue on, you are going to go right next to that stitch inside that loop. Sorry, the hand gets in the way doing that. So let me put the needle in there. You're going right next to that stitch, right in the loop. And then you're going to go down again. I bring it at the side there, and you're going to make the length of chain that you want. I have a tendency to make mine pretty small. You're going through with it, making that loop, keeping the thread underneath the needle. And again, you're going to go and start the next one by going right back next to your stitch, right in that loop, which is a chain. And you can see why it's called the chain stitch, because we're just chaining these all together. And then you're coming up with your needle below that for your next one. We'll make it a little bigger so you can see it a little better. You have another one. So you're just continuing to make those loops, taking your needle, putting it right in next to your thread, coming down the length that you want your chain, keeping your thread. By underneath the needle, we mean under there. You don't have to hold it. You just have to make sure that it's under your needle and pulling that, and that makes your chain. And that is how the chain stitch is done. And you are just going to go all the way down your line, and you're going to draw other lines or fill the space, or you can draw something that you want to do the chain stitch on there, which I didn't make an example of that, but I can show you that when we go on to our stitch the next week, if you want to leave a space in case you want to do that and just do a couple, 2 or 3 lines. I'm just going to continue same way, trying to hold that to the side and do it sideways is a little difficult. But we're putting our needle right in there where we first put it down. Oops, that would be a little small. And then coming up right below it, pulling it through, and there's our loop. You don't want to pull that too tight. You're just going down through it again. making it the length that you want. Making that loop, and see, we made quite a small one there. You want to be consistent in the size, unless you're deliberately trying to make a large chain, small chain, large chain, small chain, which would look like some chains that we see, but you want to try and make them all consistent. Doing this sideways is just a little difficult, but trying to keep my hand out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. If I was left-handed, my hand would be out of the way. But we'll continue down. Make sure you keep that thread to the left so it stays underneath your needle. This is once you get used to doing this is a really fun stitch to do. A very useful stitch, can be used for many, many things. And you'll just continue all the way down to the end of your line. Go ahead and finish that. When I pull it to the side, my needle has a tendency to go to the side also. Okay. But get it up here closer and you can see that is how it ends up looking. Just like a chain. I'm just gonna we call it parking our needle. And what I do so that it doesn't come unthreaded is I take the ends of this and I just do a couple wraps around my needle like a figure 8 and leave it there and it will be out of the way. So our next stitch is going to be our running stitch. And I'll get my other thread on that, which is this stitch right here. And it comes in handy. It is one you will be doing a lot because that is the stitch that you will baste a lot of your fabrics down on your slow stitching to keep them in place until you have done the decorative stitches and whatever else that you are doing on the page. So you will be doing them in a bigger stitch, like a basting stitch, running stitch, but this also is a decorative stitch that is used in embroidery. So this is the running stitch, and to do that, we are going to start at this end because I am right-handed, and you're going to come up at the base of your first stitch, and you're just going to go then right into the end of the width of that stitch, go under and come right up at the beginning of the next stitch. And same, you're going down, under. You can do more than one at a time. That's why it's called a running stitch. I just went under and doing the length of the stitch. I need to come up so I end up with my needle on the top. But you can do several of them in a row like that. This is a very easy one. Most people know this stitch already, but you're just going at the beginning, under, coming to the beginning of the stitch, the end, going under, coming back up at the beginning of the next stitch. And pull your needle through and make sure that you don't gather that as you go. Don't pull too tight. And you just continue on. You can do one at a time, or you can do several, however you want to do that. And we're at the end of that one. And since I did the entire line on this one, because it's easy to do, that yellow doesn't show up too well for you, does it? I'm going to show you how I finish off my thread on the back. Instead of tying a knot, what I do is I'm just going to weave it under several of my stitches on the back, changing the direction once in a while to make sure it doesn't come out. But there, it's held down. That way we don't have to have a knot on the back of our work. And you can clip it off right close to the edge there. It's not going to come out on you. So that is the running stitch. Very, very easy to do. And the next is the fly stitch. It's going to be a little bit different than our other stitches. We've got quite a long thread here, but oh, and I forgot to tell you the page number for the running stitch. The running stitch was on page, let me see, page 46. And our fly stitch is on page 30. And that is the one that we are going to be doing now. And it's going to be, we'll see how, oopsie, sorry, getting over here. But this is the fly stitch right here. It makes kind of like a V, but you're going up in one, you're hooking it at the bottom. This is a very handy stitch as well as decorative. It can be used for many, many things. But to do that, again, we are going to start from the back side. We're going to come up at the beginning of our stitch. And I do have the 2 lines drawn here. That is how you'll make your reference lines for that. But I'm coming up. Again, you're going to do like you did with the chain stitch. You're going to keep your thread below, and then you are going to go across over to the other side, put your needle and your stitch in there, and then you are going to come down in the middle and come up with your needle at an angle, keeping that thread below. We're going to pull that. Didn't get exactly in my middle there. I was watching the camera in that same time. And then you are going to go right back down on the other side of your thread where you just came up. And at the same time that you're doing that, you can take your needle and bring it up for the start of your next stitch. But that is holding that down. We're going to let the thread drop down there again. We're going to come straight across over from where we just came up, and we're going to go down at an angle. We're going to come up in the middle, keeping the thread underneath the needle. Make that loop. It's kind of like a V or a fly, I guess. I don't know why they call it a fly stitch, but and when we take that down to anchor that, we're going to come over just below that and to the side to make the start of our next fly stitch. So we're going over to the other side, right across from where we are. And we're taking our needle at an angle. It helps to look at what I'm doing instead of, so you're coming at an angle down below, keeping that thread underneath the needle. Oops, we got a loose thread in there. You can see that one got a little longer. It's going to be based on whatever you are using your stitch for at the time, what size you make that. And I'm going to show you in a minute here. We'll do a couple more. So you're going again right across or from that one, down at an angle, a little farther than that, right in the center, keeping the thread underneath your needle again, bringing it up, going right down to anchor that stitch, bringing your needle over to start the top of your next one. That is how that is done. And I will show how you can also leave a tail on this if you want. So we're going over across again. We're going to come up in the middle, keep the thread underneath. And here, if you wanted to make a tail on that, you would just bring your needle down farther instead of right where you just came up. And you can go ahead to start the next one again. And bring your needle over. But now we have a tail on the end of that instead of just the thing, which can come in handy for some things. Also, you can actually put like a French knot or something at the end of that before doing your next one. It'll end up in the middle of the next fly stitch that you are doing to add more decorative stitch to it. And we'll make a tail on this one as well. And we'll do one more. But there we have the tail on that one. Coming straight across, down at an angle, coming up in the center, keeping that thread under the needle. And this one, we'll make a tail on this one. And we're going to finish on the back side there. But there, that is your fly stitch. And you can make those any size that you want. Again, I'm just going to go on the back side and bring my thread through some of those stitches to hold it down. Doing it that way, you just want to make sure you go through enough that it's not going to come undone, and clip it off. Okay, so we flip this over, and that is how, that's just the thread sticking there from that other chain stitch that we did. But that gives you an idea of how your grid is going to work with all of your stitches down in there. And I've left a space because I may make, what I plan on doing is making a design here, and I will use the stitch in the stitching of that, whatever I draw there. I'm just putting another knot in my thread before I put it away, so it's ready when I pick it up. But that is the 3 stitches for this part 3. So you can go ahead and do those and practice, and you will want to put that back in your book in the proper location so that you don't lose it and misplace it. So we're going to put that right back, line it back up, put it back in our book. If I zoomed out, you'd be able to see that a little better. There we go. But I'm putting it right back together like it was, taking the clip that we took off, clipping that back together, which once we are done, you see where we have the SF 101 on the, these pages will be have a stitch that goes all around and that makes them together so you don't see any of that work that is inside. That's why they are done this way, because otherwise you'd be stitching through your other page and you don't want that. So that is why we use the SF 101. So it stabilizes our fabric and makes the stitches stand out better on the top, and you don't see your stitches through when you are doing that, or on it doesn't go on to the next page also. Okay, so I'm going to slide these back in here where they go, so we know that we have everything back in the order that our book is supposed to be. And then when you have done that, you can just lay it aside until we come to part 3. But there is some things that you are going to have to get ready also this week before we do part 3. And I'm going to kind of show you that now and go over that. But this is a layout that I think is going to be how it is. I may change a few things. I'm not sure, but that is the layout for the cover of my book. Now, you aren't going to want to do the cover of your book first, because as you are doing some of the other slow stitching, it may give you some ideas for what you want on your cover of your slow stitching journal. And I do have, if you are wanting to put this on yours, that will be in a PDF along with some of the other things, and also the all of the stitches that we are doing. Oh, this is the other book, sorry. All of these stitches that we are doing on our grid, where I have labeled those by hand. You can, if you want to, print those out and then trace them onto a piece of fabric and stitch that down up there if you want. That is another option in the way of doing that. And I do have those also all printed out on the same PDF that this is, if you are wanting to use that. So that will be available to you. But what I suggest is that you kind of choose a theme or a focus, a color, something like that, that you are going to use for your journal. So you have an idea on what you want to pull out for your supplies, or you can just do it randomly, no problem on that. You just might have to pull a whole lot more fabrics that way. But I am going to be using basically pinks, blues, greens, and a little bit of yellow thrown in there for my embroidery journal this time. So to do that, the first thing that we are going to need is we are going to need scraps of fabric. And here in this container, we're going to pull this up so we get a wider view here. There we go. Just a tad more. There we go. But so I have a container here, and this is my focus fabric. So that is in there as well. I might be using it in other places throughout there. But so I have pulled a bunch of different blue fabrics, and this is from your smaller scrap stash, not your big, unless you need a color that you haven't cut any from, but you want to pull from your smaller leftover pieces. And when I say small, there's some in here. When I get to them, I will show you, but you can use really small pieces. So if you haven't done slow stitching before, some pieces that you may have been throwing away before, you may decide that you're going to keep. But you can see there are a whole lot of blues that I have pulled and put in there. So we're going to want that. And then I said I'm going to throw some yellow in. So I have yellows in here that I have also pulled from my stash. And then we have the greens. You're just pulling all kinds of different ones. I have to show you this because these are actually apples on here. And what I see is if you don't look at that and you turn it the other direction, look at the one that my thumb is on, it kind of looks like a petal or a leaf. So if you fussy cut that, you can use that instead of it being an apple. You can use it at, well, you wouldn't want to use green probably as a petal of a flower, but it would make a beautiful leaf on something. So just kind of look at your fabrics differently and you might find things like that. But so we have a bunch of greens in there. And you might want this looks like, well, that's not green, blue, or yellow, but you might want some neutrals in there and also some plain, either your plain muslin or plain other, because you might want to put some words scattered through and about in your slow stitching journal. So it's always good to have some that you will be able to put printing on or words. And and there's some cute butterflies that are in the pinks on there, so that is thrown in. And then we have our pinks and a through few of the red also thrown in there, but all all kinds of pinks. So that gives you an idea. You are just going to go through and you are going to pull a whole bunch of fabrics in the colors that you are going to be using. And if I can find where I put, when I'm talking about smaller, smaller pieces, these are really small scraps that are left over from other projects, of course, and those are usable in slow stitch. So don't throw those types of things away because you will be able to use them in your slow stitching. But so I have several. I mean, yeah, look at that piece. You'd think, yeah, I'm not keeping that. I won't use it. These little squares are actually usable in slow stitching. So yeah. So keep those types of things too. So those are thrown in there because they are in the colors that I will be using. So that is, you are going to want to, oops, better put the blues back in there. I focus one back on top. But yeah, you are going to want to get your fabrics pulled and ready. And then the other thing that you're going to want, and we'll pull this one down for that. We've got quite a few different things in here, which we'll go through this first. You might want some buttons. So if you have some antique buttons, go through and pull some of those out. But I have a mixture of antique buttons and other ones because you know when we might want to use some of the others. This is an antique one, but several buttons in the colors that I will be using. In this, that's actually pink. It's not looking too pink there, but and this is a yellowy green, kind of in between. But yeah, I have several, several, and I even have these pearl buttons because you never know when you might want to use something like that. But like I said, we have a mixture between the yeah, there's another antique one. That's from my another another older one. But yeah, you want to just go through your button collection and pull some buttons because they come in very handy on there. And then of course you're going to want to pull some laces. We've got a pink lace thrown in here. We've got this pretty pink and glittery. There's glitter on that one that we have pulled. And let me see. We got tangled up. Just some old laces there. This one is a lace with a trim, but when you find ones like this, always think you can actually take the stitching off and remove this lace from this under, and you can use it in two different ways. You can use it together or you can use them separately. So keep that in mind when you're looking for your laces. But let me see, what else do we have? And we have this beautiful old one that is from part of the lace table runners and things that my friend gave me. This is also a section from that as well that I cut out of it. And then we have some of this old lace, but yeah, you want to pull a bunch of different ones because you never know what you may decide to use where on your pages. And I believe we have, yeah, some of this. But then in addition to that, I have this is actually a yarn. Remember when we made the ruffled scarves? This is that type of yarn. It comes in really neat for slow stitching. There's many things you can do with that. Here we have just, this is actually cut out of the middle of the lace. It's the round medallions that made that up. This is a section, bigger section cut out of the antique lace. And then, of course, you might want to have some triangular pieces and get that out. But then we have yarns that are pink and have glitter in them. You might want to use those for couching or something like that. We have some other ones. And then, of course, we have rickrack. Those come in handy as stems for flowers at times, but just all kinds of different things to have for embellishing your project. So you'll want to pull those. And you will want to have all kinds of different threads in the colorway or random if you are doing random. I've got a bunch of pink threads in here. I have a bunch of green, and I've just pulled them from part of the Valdani pearl cottons that I have, and part of the DMC floss, just parts of things that are scraps and left over, but got the yellow in there and the green over here, but all kinds of different um, colors of our floss. And I do have some metallic ones. Oops, see, about rolled out of my hand. Some metallic sparkly ones as well. And might use those in there. And let me see if you are someone, this is my pin cushion. Sorry about that. If you are someone that does yo-yos and you have some, you might want to put some leftovers of those in there that you may use for embellishing. If you don't, out of some of your fabrics, throw in your yo-yo makers and you can make some to add to your project as you go along. If you do, make sure you throw in some hand quilting or upholstery thread also to be able to make those. You will need a stronger thread for that. And then last but not least, if you have beads, you may want to see what you have in your collection to go ahead and be able to add some beading along. So I have some pink ones. You're going to need pins, of course. And I have some clear ones that I threw in here. I have green, since that's the colors I'm going with. We have some yellow, and we have some other green. I don't have blue, so I may have to make a trip and find some blue beads. But that is some of the other things for embellishing that you are going to want to have. And these are the um, quilters pencils that I talked about before that you might want to use along the way. Besides for marking the registration lines for learning your stitches on your grid, you may want that use those at different other places in your slow stitching project. So have those handy too. And this is the one that is the disappearing ink, water soluble and air erasable. So you want to have all that stuff together and ready to go. And I do have the leftover pellet in here and the instructions as well on that. Set that out of the side to the side, hopefully without tipping it. And let me see, there are a few other things that you may want. Of course, you want to have a pin cushion, your needles, your needle threader, your thimble, and a small pair of scissors. And then you may also find out that the Eileen's tacky glue will come in handy because all of your pieces, just like none of this is only pinned down right now. And when it comes to tacking those all down, you won't want all those pins in the way of all your thread that's going to be going through. So the Eileen's tacky glue, because it washes out, it doesn't stay in, and just you will only need just a little dab of it. You might want to use that on some of your pieces of fabric, like right in the middle, just a dab to hold it down so that you can remove your pins and have those out of the way. So that comes in very handy. It's the Eileen's original tacky glue. And in addition to that, which we didn't look through those, if you have some of have made up like I do leftovers, I just make these up. They are let me see, what do we have that we can show? But they're little things that are embroidery, and these are on what is called stick and stitch, and it is a sulky product. You can either get it this way, which we'll try and get the glare off that, but it is called stick and stitch, and it is by Sulky. You can get those off of Amazon. It is a printable paper that has the printing on the one side. When you peel it off, it will stick onto your fabric. You stitch whatever it is that's on there. For an example, here's a little flower you could use. When your stitching is done, it's all done, all you have to do is wet that, and the paper part, sticky part, will dissolve away in the water, and all you'll have left is your embroidery. But yeah, we have several different things in here. I just print them out on there, make them up ahead, cut a bunch of them out, and throw them in here. But you can either get the stick and stitch, like I say, it's a sulky product, or they also have the sulky, and it is called sticky fabric sulky. What they are both available. So you might want some of those, and you can find your designs. You can purchase some that are already on this, and I have just kind of made more copies of those and cut out, or you can find it on free printable sites and use them that way. But yeah, we've got lots in there. So that is something that is handy to have as well. Put the, oops, got a little butterfly, forgot to stick in there. But that is all of the things that you are going to need. And let me go ahead and bring the camera back. I think I'm choosing the correct one. Here I am. Okay, so we have everything sitting there. But that is everything for part 2 and what you will need to gather so you are ready for part 3 as well, which next week we will be doing part 3, and you will be learning some more embroidery stitches, as well as learning how to do the layout for your first page in your embroidery slow stitching journal. So I hope you have enjoyed part two, as much as your interest was. It was a wonderful interest. A lot of you that are following along in this project. And I am very, very happy to see that because, as you know, it is one of my favorite things to do, and being able to share it with those of you that have shown interest and teach you some of the steps in that and get you going on that as well is really makes my heart feel good. So thank you for all of you that have decided to follow along. And those of you that aren't and are just watching, thank you also. But we will be on part three in the series next week, and there will be a Zoom scheduled of sometime this week for those of you that are in the Facebook group and are doing this. So we will have a question and answer session and also just do some work, get to know each other, and work on our embroidery slow stitching journals during that Zoom. So watch for that. It will be posted in the Facebook group and with all the information for that. So thank you, everyone. And in the meantime, remember, I can keep you in stitches. Bye-bye, everyone.